Well, good afternoon. I want to start with the facts. Ontario is experiencing unprecedented growth. Last year alone, Ontario grew by more than 500,000 people. The federal government brought in 1.1 million people into our country. 600,000 people landed everywhere else. But folks, guess what? Eventually, they're going to end up in Ontario. That's more newcomers than both Texas and Florida, the fastest growing states in America. We are now the fastest growing region, bar none, in North America. At current rates, Ontario will grow by more than 5 million people in the next 10 years. That's close to adding 2 cities the size of Toronto in a decade. These are staggering numbers, numbers that didn't exist a few short months ago. Considering these facts has never been more important to deliver on our commitment to build at least 1.5 million homes. Failing to act would worsen the housing supply and affordability crisis. In particular, young families and newcomers in search of the Ontario dream will see home ownership slip further away as they're locked out of the housing market. Failing to act would hurt everyone in Ontario by driving up the cost of goods and services and by hampering new job creation and investments. Failing to act threatens to erode Canadians' so far unwavering support for immigration at a time when our economic success depends on welcoming skilled newcomers to fill critical labor gaps. As Canada and Ontario welcome more people, we need to build more homes of all types. It's that simple. To do so, our government is the first in decades to have a real plan to build more homes. Our Housing Supply Action Plan has set ambitious targets for growing municipalities. It has cut costly red tape while reducing municipal fees and taxes on purpose-built rentals, as well as affordable and attainable housing. Through our transit-oriented communities, we're planning for density right next to transit, including the new Ontario Line subway. After decades of stagnation, we're starting to see results. Against challenging headwinds like higher inflation rates and labor shortages, 2021 and 2022 had the most housing starts in over 30 years. This positive momentum and a step in the right direction, but as our province grows at an incredible speed, we need to do more. That's why, when we were re-elected in June, we made the decision to exhaust all options available to the province to build more homes faster, including by developing new policy framework to guide how we could unlock non-sensitive lands while growing the overall size of the Greenbelt. 5 months later, I was briefed on specific sites that met this criteria, including offsets that grew the size of the Greenbelt. Driven by the need to build more homes, Cabinet approved these land swaps. This initiative will add more than 50,000 new homes to house more than 150,000 people, while at the same time growing the Greenbelt by 2,400 acres. Most of these sites were requested by municipalities, in some cases for several years now. Critically, this initiative impacts sites not owned by the government, it impacts privately owned properties. This initiative established conditions to ensure that billions of dollars worth of community benefits, including new roads, parks, community centers, transit, water, and healthcare infrastructure, as well as major nonprofit housing builds, are paid for in full by the landowners and builders, not Ontario or municipal taxpayers. That's billions of dollars in new infrastructure. That's new schools, parks, community centers, long-term care homes, and hospitals. That's new supportive housing. That wouldn't exist if our government didn't make the decision to unlock these properties. We're also requiring that new home construction begin no later than 2025, with significant progress on approvals and implementation by the end of 2023. If these conditions aren't met, we'll return these sites to the Greenbelt. This initiative will also spur significant economic development and GDP growth by creating new construction jobs and long-term employment opportunities in healthcare and social services. Now, while we'll never waver in our commitment to build more homes, we know that there are areas for improvement as we move forward. We were moving fast. We couldn't have had a better process. We could have had a better process. As Premier, the buck stops with me, and I take full responsibility for the need for better process. That's why we support and will implement 14 of the report's 15 recommendations. Doing so will strengthen government process. Every day we receive dozens of requests and proposals. We receive them from stakeholders, MPPs of every party, and everyday voters. Some of the best ideas we get come from outside the government, and it's important that we never stop listening. These proposals, they span every ministry: health, long-term care, transportation, and yes, housing. What matters is that the right process is followed once we receive these proposals. In this case, every proposal was measured against our requirements. Those that met them were considered for approval. Those that didn't, weren't. And as I've said, moving forward, we recognize that the process should be better. As we implement the report's recommendations, it will be better. At the same time, as Ontario grows, we won't deny 50,000 families, 150,000 people a chance at owning a home. We have two choices. We can build more homes, or we can sit back and let the crisis get worse. Our government is choosing to build. And as we continue to respond to the housing supply and affordability crisis, we need to keep moving. We were elected on a promise to cut through delays, to stop the never-ending talk, and deliver for the people of Ontario. When it comes to delivering, there are few issues as important as building more homes. That's why our government will proceed with these developments, so long as our criteria and requirements are met. And as we work to meet our promise to build at minimum 1.5 million homes, we will do so in a way that builds public trust and confidence in the process. We'll do everything in our power to support every newcomer and young family in search of the Ontario dream. That's my promise to you. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Now, Minister Clark and I will take questions.
Reporters could please identify yourselves by name and outlet. It'll be one question and one follow-up per reporter. First question.
Hi, Premier Liam Casey with the Canadian Press.
Hi.
The Auditor General said you and the Housing Minister didn't know what Minister Clark's Chief of Staff was doing with the Greenbelt project. How did both of you not know?
Well, I look at it, we run a $204 billion a year operation. I have trust in my ministers, I have trust in our caucus, and I have trust in our staff. And I found out the day it was going to cabinet, and that's not unusual for a premier to find out what's going on the day before you go, the day of when we go into cabinet. And that's when I found out. I approved it. At the end of the day, I take full responsibility for the process. But I can tell you, we have a housing crisis, the likes of which this province and this country has never seen before. And the reason we have a housing crisis, because we have economic growth, the likes of which this province as never seen before. People choose Ontario from around the world to come here, raise a family, to start a business, to start a better life. And as I mentioned earlier, 504,000 people landed in Ontario last year. So that leaves 600,000 people that landed everywhere else in the country. Well, folks, I will put my bottom dollar on it. 40 to 50% of the balance of the 600,000 eventually will come to Ontario, because that's where the growth is. That's the quality of life. No better place in the world than right here in Ontario.
I'd like to give the minister a chance to respond too.
Sure.
So we were given a clear mandate by the people in June, and I was given a clear mandate, as the Premier stated, to get a plan in place to build homes and build them as fast as possible. We're in the middle of a housing supply crisis. It's a severe crisis, and our severity required us to act quickly. I acknowledge the recommendations in the Auditor General's report that indicate that we need to make some changes. I respect that. I agree with those recommendations, and I will implement them. I've been very clear about when I knew about the properties. It was the week before it was presented to Cabinet. But I have a very huge mandate for the government. I've delivered housing supply action plans. I've delivered strong mayors. I've delivered housing pledges for our municipalities. And the government has had results, as the Premier alluded to. The severity of the crisis dictated our government acting quickly. I recognize the changes that are recommended in this report, and I acknowledge that we need to implement them as soon as possible.
Premier,
Yes.
Did you or the housing minister or anyone connected to the government or your party receive any benefit personally from opening
Absolutely
up the Greenbelt?
not. 100% not.
Absolutely not.
Premier, it's Richard Southern with City News 680. It seems like you're admitting that some mistakes were made by your government today. You know, you say the buck stops with you, there
Yes.
are areas for improvement. Can you be specific with Ontarians this afternoon about exactly what was done wrong?
Well, I think the report says what was done wrong. The process should have been better, and I'm admitting the process should have been better. But when you're in a housing crisis, when you have an inferno happening, you know, the firefighters run to the fire. They don't run away from it. In my position, I have to deal with the crisis. Because every single day moving forward and every day before this, I'll get in front of the media, get in front of the people, and what are you doing about housing? Every day when I met people, it's not about, I'll be very frank, it's not about the Greenbelt. Almost every question is, my children can't afford the $1.2 million it costs for an average home in Toronto and the GTA. What are we going to do? Majority of the grandparents, parents, and friends are the ones supporting young people to buy a home that they can't afford and never will afford unless it comes down to supply and demand. We're going to continue building homes. We're seeing unprecedented growth to a tune of in excess, and I'm being very conservative when I say 500,000 people a year, because we know the other people that land across the country, if they continue on this pace of 1.1 million people, they're coming to Ontario, because that's where the growth is, that's the quality of life.
For Minister Steve Clark, Minister, it's hard for anyone that follows anything in this building to believe, I think, that you would not know what your Chief of Staff is doing on such a big file. How did you not know? And are you asking for that Chief of Staff's resignation? And have you talked to the Premier about resigning yourself from this portfolio, sir?
I appreciate the confidence that the Premier has in me and my staff. I'm fully committed to the problems in the process that led us here to this report. And I'm committed to ensuring that the 14 recommendations will move forward and will move forward quickly. But at the same time, we have a generation of Ontarians that are getting pushed farther and farther away from realizing the dream of home ownership. We need to continue to move forward on our housing supply action plans, on our strong mayor proposals, on our housing pledges, and on intensifying around transit. All of those principles, we need to continue to move forward. The Premier has highlighted the growth that our province is experiencing. We have to have a housing supply plan that meets that goal.
Hi there, Alan Hale from Queen's Park today. So just to be clear, this chief of staff is keeping his job?
I appreciate the support that the Premier has given to me and my team. We are going to deliver on these recommendations to the people of Ontario to add trust into the system and to provide that transparency that the report talks about. We will continue. All of my staff will continue to work with and support the Integrity Commissioner's investigation and the recommendations that are in this report that pertain to the Integrity Commissioner. We will continue, my entire team, to work with him moving forward.
Mr. Premier,
Yes.
you criticized the last changes to the Greenbelt as being the result of, obviously, how we put it, a bunch of liberal staffers with crayons in a back room. But it seems like in this case, the changes were mostly decided by packets at a party.
Well,
Can you please explain why you guys, for months and months and months, denied that there was any problem here until it literally had to be dragged out of you by an Auditor General report? How can anybody in Ontario believe when you say there's no problem, and how can we be sure that you're just not gaslighting everybody?
Alan, the Premier's already addressed the information. There is a big difference between receiving information than advancing government policy before it has been decided. The Premier's acknowledged we receive information from a wide variety of sources. I can think most question periods, I receive an envelope from someone in the legislature about a particular plan, many of the times from the opposition. Regardless, the information that is in this report, the recommendations regarding how we receive information, is extremely important to us. And again, we will implement those recommendations to bring that transparency back into the system.
I would still like to hear from the Premier on this.
Well, I'll just repeat what the minister said. We could be sitting in the legislature and members of the opposition will come up and say, here's a proposal. I'm not against that. The best ideas come from outside the government that people will send in, no matter what government it is, by the way, will send in proposals to a certain minister or my office. It goes through the process and we look at it, and if it's a good recommendation, then we sit down and discuss it. But if it's not a good recommendation, then we don't move on it. But this all goes back to affordability. The number one issue facing Ontarians right now is affordability. We see gas prices jacked up. We see people losing their home because the interest rates were jacked up, that I'm dead against, and the speed they were jacked up from the Bank of Canada and the governor from the Bank of Canada. That's unacceptable. I've heard story after story, and I know the media's heard story after story. The last one I heard is about a woman up in Barrie that used to pay, I think it was $2,400 on her mortgage, now paying over $6,000. Her husband works 2 jobs, she's working 2 jobs, and they can't afford it, and they have to sell their dream house that they've worked their back off. That's what's affecting people. When they go to the grocery store and they see the prices going up, that's what people are concerned about. And then, be it the young families that need to buy something, that's what affects people. When they have to rent a place and they don't have enough rentals, that is what affects each and every one of us, including the people in the media. They have families, they have young families, and they're going to go to you, your kids, and say, you know, Mom, Dad, I need a deposit. I need a deposit of $250,000 because the home we're looking at, a small little bungalow, is $120,000. And by the way, if I go to a condo, and usually about 600 square feet, downtown is about $700,000, $800,000. They can't afford it. The only way we fix this problem is supply and demand, at least to level it off, and to make sure that we have homes for newcomers coming here, no matter if they're rentals, nonprofit, affordable housing, attainable housing. That's what we need, and that's exactly what our government's going to do.
Hey, Premier Minister, it's Charlie Pinkerton of the Trillium. Minister, my first question is for you. In the report, you say that you were unaware of what your chief of staff was working on. However, on, I believe it's September 27th or 29th, you received an email from a lawyer representing one of the developers whose lands were later removed. If sent to your email, how can both of these things be true?
If I understand the email in question, it was referred to the government email and it was referred to the public service. I never saw the email. I receive, again, just like the Premier said, I receive emails all the time regarding ERO postings, regarding consultations that the government has. I receive unsolicited emails to all the accounts. Every time they're received, they're forwarded to the public service to review. And in this case, if I understand the email you're talking about, that was immediately sent. I never saw the email.
All right, and Premier, this question is for you.
Yes.
If one unelected political staffer in charge of a group of public servants in a short period of time can, at the behest of a small group of individuals who are going to make several billions of dollars off of a decision, direct these public servants to come up with this plan that then makes its way through cabinet and is approved that way, if that is the process of how things work, how can Ontarians trust the government's decision-making?
Well, Charlie, what I did say, we will take 14 of the 15 recommendations from the report, and I've directed my staff to immediately action those items, and we're going to make sure that 14 of the 15 are going to be covered off. And that's what we're going to end up doing, making sure the process is a lot clearer. I take full responsibility if the process wasn't. At the end of the day, Charlie, people, be it yourself or anyone else in this room, need to be able to afford a home or an afforded rental or buy a condo. And right now, it's unaffordable for the vast majority of the population unless they inherit a house or apartment or a condo from their parents.
Premier, if the housing crisis was so urgent, why didn't you move to expropriate the 7,400 acres and open up that land rather than let some progressive, conservative, connected developers make, in one case, on one parcel, potentially $6 billion? We wouldn't be here today if you'd just done that. Do you regret not doing something like that, expropriating the land so that the housing could be built more quickly?
Rob,
Go ahead,
the
Minister.
Premier and I have been very clear on this report and the recommendations to improve the process. We are committed to the 14 recommendations to make a more transparent process moving forward. We've been very clear that there needs to be a better process to how the government and all ministries receive information. We concur with the Auditor General's recommendation, but at the end of the day, we also are in the middle of a housing supply crisis, and we need to ensure that we do everything possible to get shovels in the ground to build at least 1.5 million homes. We have to continue with our housing supply action plans. We have to continue to intensify around transit as part of our transit-oriented communities program. The government needs to move forward. The Premier makes an exceptional point. There's two choices. You either continue to build or you don't. We've stated very clearly, in addition to fixing the process, we're going to build.
Premier, do you regret not expropriating the land instead of allowing some Tory-connected developers to make billions of dollars?
No, I don't regret that. I want homes built. As soon as government starts getting involved in, the home building industry, that's unacceptable. You let the market dictate. Folks, this is about process. We're going to correct the process. But what I'm not hearing today is 1/3 of 1%. I'm going to repeat that number. 1/3 of 1% was taken out of the Greenbelt because it was beside an existing development. On one side of the street, there's houses. The other side of the street, it's an empty field. What we did, we put 0.5 back in, 2,600 more acres. We have grown the Greenbelt, and we're going to continue making sure that the directive I've sent from the day we got elected to the minister, build more homes. We're in a housing crisis right now like we've never seen before. And again, it is affecting every single person. When I'm out there meeting people, I'm meeting hundreds of people if not thousands, depending on what event we go to. The number one issue is affordability, the economy, and healthcare. They're the top three. I have yet, let me correct that. I had one person come up to me and say, oh, I'm concerned about the Greenbelt. After I explained this to the lady, she went on to tell me how her grandkids can't afford a home. And she fully understood it. So we're going to continue building homes, making it affordable for people to live here in Ontario. We're going to continue creating new economic prosperity for the people of Ontario. We're going to continue attracting companies from all over the world, right here in Ontario. We are so blessed to live in the greatest jurisdiction anywhere in the world, no matter if it's getting a great job, no matter if it's going to colleges or our universities that are best in the world, that we're graduating 65,000 STEM graduates every single year, and having a safe community, no matter where you live in Ontario. That's what these companies, worldwide corporations, are looking for. They're looking for a stable government that cuts the red tape and the regulations. And we've cut $8 billion off the backs and the burden of companies. And I just want to remind everyone, 300,000 people lost their jobs under the previous government. There's over 700,000 more people working today than there was 5 years ago when we got elected. We're moving with our plan, moving forward with our plan. Our plan is working.
Premier, as part of the fixes that you've called for to this, the process that you say was flawed, what tangible things will Ontarians see? Will political staffers have less power? We know in the gas plants fiasco with the Liberals, political staffers had too much power. You guys in opposition, when Steve Clark was in opposition, he was making hay about that. Now the shoe's on the other foot. Your political staffers are the one in the crosshairs of an Auditor General.
Well, and fair question. I appreciate the question. But we're comparing apples and oranges. We're talking $1 billion of taxpayers' money versus no taxpayers' money, privately owned property, building homes that we get to direct, by the way. And any developer or builder, home builder, can go down the street and start building. And we have nothing to say. We can't tell them, we need this, we need that. With these lands, we can direct that we need attainable, affordable housing. We need to have purpose-built rentals. That's what we can do, opposed to any other development. And we're working hand in hand with the municipalities to make sure that they meet their targets.
Hi, Premier. It's Cynthia Mulligan.
Hi, Cynthia.
Premier, the original allegations and criticisms were that somebody from your government tipped off developers. Now we're seeing in this report that it was actually developers telling a chief of staff where to build. Isn't that just as bad or potentially even worse, because you're being told what to do? Your government is being told what to do.
Cynthia,
That is,
both
go
of us,
ahead, Minister.
both of us have been very clear. We accept the recommendations in this report regarding accepting information. But again, there's a big difference in terms of asking for clarification information versus disclosing in advance what government policy is going to be before it's actually decided upon. We've been unequivocal, both today and in the past, that that did not happen. No one knew before the government made the decision. And we've been also unequivocal on when I was briefed, when I briefed Cabinet, and when that final decision. Now, in saying all of that, I'm also the first person that takes responsibility that the process was too fast, that the severity of our problem made us move at a very quick pace, and I acknowledge the findings in the report and the fact that we need to improve the process. I agree exactly with those 14 recommendations, and I'm committed personally to ensure that they are implemented.
Were you going to add something to that, Premier?
No, I think the Minister said exactly what we've repeated a few times.
The bottom line then, the people giving recommendations to your government, which apparently were largely accepted, those people stand to gain billions of dollars. Does that seem fair? The Auditor General herself said the process was biased. How do you justify that? And do the ends justify the means? I'd like the Premier to answer this first,
But
please.
Cynthia, I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that we need to change the process. And we're committed to make sure that we do change the process. But the Premier's already addressed the one point that I want to emphasize, and that's that we have a nonpartisan office of the Provincial Land and Development Facilitator who will work with the municipalities on these 15 sites and will have benefits, community benefits, roads, transit, schools, healthcare facilities, that they will pay, the landowners will pay at their expense. That is not being talked about. Billions of dollars of community benefits, including, as the Premier noticed right off the top, the fact that 150,000 people will have a roof over their head. That's a very important community benefit, and it's much needed in a province like ours that has such a severe housing supply crisis.
But Premier, do the ends justify the means?
Yes, they do. We've admitted many times today, and I'll continue to admit, that we're going to correct the process. But what matters to the people of Ontario, making sure they can afford a home, attainable home, an affordable home, a regular home, a condo, a rental. That's what people are concerned about. And I always say, you know, you have two choices here. We sit back and do nothing, like the previous government said, and just watch the crisis grow. The difference between our government and the previous government changed the Greenbelt 17 times. I'm going to repeat that number. 17 times. And guess why they changed the Greenbelt, my friends? Because they were building mega mansions for their buddy. They were building a golf course. They were building a golf dome, and they're building a Jiffy Lube. We're in a housing crisis. We're building it for the average homeowner, the average person out there that's making $40,000, $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 that right now can't afford it. And it's no different, as I mentioned, Cynthia, you know, and be it your daughters or mine or anyone in this gallery right now, they're going to want to buy a home, buy a condo, and they'll be priced out of the market. It's as simple as that. And the way we resolve it is to have more supply. And that's exactly what we're doing. But with that supply, infrastructure comes with it. As the minister mentioned, there's a proposal to build a hospital on one of these sites. There's a proposal to build long-term care homes. And when they build these sites, what comes is, which is being paid by the home builders, by the way, not the taxpayer, making sure that we have the infrastructure of the pipes, the electricity, everything you need to build a community, including a new school or multiple schools, depending on the site. That's what we're focused on. And these people, the 150,000 people at minimum, are going to be thankful they have a place to call home, have the Ontario dream, have a roof over their head.
Premier, just to pick up on that point, hasn't the Auditor General's report comprehensively demolished that talking point that you bring up over and over again, the 17 times the Liberals altered the Greenbelt? I covered that when it happened. It was 340 acres. It was mostly administrative changes, transition problems with the boundaries. It is not related in any way to the process you went under, which was 3 weeks. Nobody could apply. There were 600 applications under that process. So first, if you just respond to why do you continue to repeat that utterly demolished talking point that there's no comparison between these two events?
Well, actually, there is. There's one government that changed it 17 times because they knew it was the wrong decision, right? It's very simple. But they did it for two different reasons. I'll finish my question, then you can ask me another one, and the answer, I should say. They went out, which is not being reported, for their buddies, for their mega mansions. They went out to build a golf course. They went out for a golf dome and a Jiffy Lube. We're going out to build homes. By the way, 1/3 of 1% of the 2 million acres that the Greenbelt covers, 1/3 of 1%. And by the way, we increased that. We've added 2,600 acres. The process, I've agreed, take responsibility, and we're changing it. Matter of fact, we're changing it as I gave direction as soon as I heard about the report.
And that stat you mentioned, which is an important one to mention, but and that brings me to my next question, which is why do this then? If the chorus of experts, we're talking about the Planning Institute, all of the regional planners, the regions that surround Toronto, your own government's housing task force, said, we do not need to expand the amount of land we have for housing. We have enough housing, according to a number of estimates, including bureaucrats who work for your government. The Ministry of Housing told me several years ago this was the case. They have enough housing land earmarked for 2 million homes. The problem is we're not building fast enough, and you've made other changes in that direction. Why do you need to ruin everything with this problematic process that's gotten everybody upset?
But Jeff,
You may call, I apologize, Minister, you may call it ruining. I'm calling giving people an opportunity to buy a home, to buy an affordable home. And you're comparing stats 2 years ago. You're comparing stats a year ago that we didn't know we were having 500,000 people show up to Ontario. We're basing that on 200,000 people. We didn't base it on having 2 cities the size of Toronto land in Ontario in the next 10 years. And by the way, the 504,000 people coming to Ontario, that's not even accurate. As I said, the balance of the 600,000 people, the 1.1 million the feds brought in, you know and I know, minimum 40-50% are landing here in Ontario.
50,000 is a drop in the bucket then, isn't it?
Actually, it's 100. Tell that to 50,000 people. Tell that to your kids, my friend. Tell that to your kids. Tell it to the grandparents and the parents that have to find a home. You have 2 choices. It's 150,000 people. We're changing their lives. We're giving them the opportunity. We're going to continue building. And at minimum, we need 1.5 million homes. And I just want to point out, we have to work collaboratively with the municipalities. We put the goals out there. They signed off on it. Well, I'm going to start off with positive news. These are the people, or the towns and the cities, I should say, that are meeting their targets. So I'll start off with Barrie. The rate of meeting target pace right now, they're at 90%. So congratulations to the mayor and the council. Brantford is leading the entire province at 109%. Just looking down the list here, we have Pickering at 107%. And you know who I have to congratulate? I have to congratulate former Mayor Tory. With the largest city in the country, with more hurdles and more barriers down at that city than you'd ever imagine, Mayor Tory drove a system. He's at 90%. I'm hoping the new mayor will follow in the steps of Mayor Tory. Now I'm going to point out one city. And it's not fair to the rest of the province that the burden of going through this falls on every other big city and every other jurisdiction. And that jurisdiction is Burlington. They've been allocated 29,000 new homes. They built 208. 208. That's 5%. There's no one that comes close to 5%. At minimum, it might be 29%. So it's not fair to the rest of the province that there's a delay in Burlington of only 5%. That is totally unacceptable.
Hi, Premier. Catherine DeClercq, CTV News.
Hi, Catherine.
You said you're going to be implementing 14 of the 15 recommendations from this report. I just want to be absolutely clear. The recommendation you are not implementing is the reevaluation of this decision here to remove land from the Greenbelt in light of this report.
That's correct. Since we've increased the Greenbelt by 2,600 acres, we're going to move forward. For 150,000 people, we're going to change their lives. 50,000 homes of all types are going to be built. And then on top of that, at minimum, we need 1.5 million homes.
And you've mentioned a lot about the criteria used to build these homes, but the report itself showed that the criteria was changed. It wasn't used as a rubric for decision making. Rather, the decisions were made by changing the criteria or changing the proposals to meet this criteria. Is that standard practice for decision making?
So I think,
go ahead,
Premier,
Minister.
if I can, again, it's a symptom of the speed, right? We had such a severe crisis. We went to the people in June, were reelected on a plan to build at least 1.5 million homes, and we acknowledge the report that indicates that the process was flawed, that it was too fast, that there needs to be change. So I acknowledge that we need to do better. I accept responsibility as minister to implement a better plan for Ontarians, but at the same time, we can stop or we can move forward. And it's very important for us to build upon our housing supply action plans, our municipal pledges, our transit-oriented community plan, with providing an opportunity and hope for 150,000 people to have a home under them, and also to have the community benefits, the schools, the healthcare facilities, the parks that make up for that at the expense of the landowner. So I acknowledge that the process needs to be improved, and again, I commit to ensure that it is going to be improved.
Premier Sean O'Shea with Global News. In the very first page of her report, the Auditor General talked about the fact that of these 1.5 million homes that need to be built over the next little while, that actually none of them needed to be built in the Greenbelt, that there was sufficient land available elsewhere. So if you didn't need to build in the Greenbelt, why take these lands in order to be able to build on the Greenbelt and at the same time put a lot of money to the pockets of specific developers?
Sean, the reference in that report was to the Housing Affordability Task Force. It was a report that was given to me some time ago. Almost immediately upon its tabling, the severity changed, right? We, as the Premier notes, we're the fastest growing jurisdiction in North America, faster than Florida and Texas. We have more new Canadians who we welcome to our province, but it only creates a much more severe problem, which forced us to move quickly. Granted, I acknowledge that there are 14 pretty stern recommendations that the government needs to look at. I've acknowledged we're going to implement them. But again, the challenges that we have, despite our success, despite having record housing starts over the last 2 years and a record purpose-built rental starts last year, we're not building enough to meet the demand in that Housing Supply Action Plan report, and we're certainly not at the pace for new Canadians coming here and the pace of growth that Ontario has. So it required us to act quickly. I recognize perhaps too quickly, but I've said it many times this morning, I'll say it again. I am committed to ensuring that these recommendations regarding the process are fixed and are strengthened.
Lastly, can the Premier comment on whether these two developers who stood to profit to the tune of about $8.3 billion were his friends? He uses the word friends a lot in press conferences. Were these his personal friends? Were these his political donors?
No, I'm going to answer that straight up. And first of all, the report doesn't mention them by name, so I'm guessing, but I'm not friends with any of these developers. I don't sit there and go to their house and have a good time. I'm about building homes. I'm about fixing the economy, making sure we continue in the right direction, to make sure people have a great job. And with that great job, they'll be able to afford a home. So I look forward to making sure that we build the 50,000 homes for 150,000 people and the families, and building beautiful communities paid by the landowner, the home builder, for the infrastructure.
So were they or were they not your friends, Premier?
Well, again, I think I answered that question pretty clearly.
Hi, Fatima Syed with the Narwhal. My first question is for the Minister. Can you be clear? When did you learn what your Chief of Staff was doing, and what was your understanding of what he had done when you presented your plan to Cabinet?
I've been very clear that at the end of October, it's in the report, when I was briefed by my staff, both political and both political and non-political public service, and the recommendation was recommended to Cabinet the following week, and Cabinet accepted it. It's documented in the report, and I've said it many, many times.
Premier, I have a question about growth. I know you want to talk about growth. For the past several months, we have heard you equivocate growth with immigration. And if implicitly, if not explicitly, you've created this trade-off, immigration for land, for the natural environment. We have to forego the Greenbelt to build houses to accept newcomers to Canada, to Ontario specifically. But the fact is that the newcomers that are coming to this province aren't able to buy a house. And they're not seeing houses built. I can fill this room with immigrants, Premier. I am one myself, and I can tell you for certain that they can't afford a house. So my question is, homes aren't being built, and the Auditor General in her report today found that there is no accountability mechanism in place to ensure that homes are built even on the parcels of the Greenbelt that have been opened. So when you talk about fixing the process, does that include an accountability mechanism? Are you going to be able to report to Ontarians, to the newcomers that you're asking to move to Ontario, that houses are getting built?
Well, I think the most important thing, Premier, if I might, is the fact that the Auditor General acknowledged her report was both financial and environmental. I want to ensure that for the 7,000 acres, the 7,000 acres that we're going to be working with those proponents to build homes for 150,000 people and the community benefits, those properties still retain the environmental protections that are in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe and the provincial policy statement. The government has not changed the existing protections for those properties. As well, there are over 9,000 acres of property that will be added to the Greenbelt, that will add environmental benefits, the urban river valleys, and part of the Periscalp Moraine. So that point hasn't been talked about enough as far as I'm concerned. The fact that the Greenbelt is going to be larger, regardless of the development opportunities, than it was when our government first took office. And at the same time, the accountability measures that are in this report that the Auditor General has put to Ontarians that need to get changed. Again, we've been unequivocal that we are going to move forward on those changes so that there is integrity and transparency built back into the system.
The reason I kept asking for more new Canadians to come here, because our economy is booming. We're short 380,000 people to fill the jobs. And your comment about saying immigrants can't afford homes, sure they can't afford them the first year, but what they do need, they need shelter, they need a roof over their head, they need purpose-built rentals, that's what they need. But to tell me that the immigrants can't afford a home 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's just not accurate. I talk to immigrants every single day, and there's numerous people that come here to this country to get a well-paying, a really good-paying job. They can afford to get a home and get a deposit. Some might have a number of family members living in the home. But to say that, they wouldn't be able to afford a home is actually disturbing. This is what this province was built on. This province was built on people coming from all over the world, believing in the Ontario dream, that they can start a business. And I've talked to many new Canadians that have come here, and after year 1 or year 2, they have their own business, or they get a fabulous job at a company that's paying really well. And then their family members get a good job. And then they all save money, and they put down a deposit. They want to make sure their kids are educated when they come here, until they don't have to go through the struggles that they have faced. Those are the new Canadians I talk to, that they're here for a better life, and we welcome them. I didn't expect a year ago or 2 years ago the federal government would bring 500,000 people in one single year. Did that catch me off guard? 100% it did. We thought maybe 200,000-300,000 people, and we were still short on homes. Folks, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure your family members, your kids, your grandchildren can afford a home. And we're going to continue building a home. And years down the road, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, as these communities flourish, the people that buy the homes flourish, they're going to remember our government by the ones that had to make tough decisions against certain groups and certain resistance. But it's going to be a beautiful community, and I can't wait to walk through that community, knock on their door, say hello, and thank them for coming here to this community. Thank you for having confidence in our government.
Harrison Lohman with the agenda with Steve Pagan. I think everyone in this room can agree, Premier, that the word of the day is process.
That's right.
That you say there are definite errors in the process, but it's people who carry out processes, people behind them.
That's right.
So I think people here are wondering who exactly those people are to blame for the bad process you describe, and will they be facing any consequences?
Well, again, I'm going to take full responsibility. I'm the Premier. That's where the buck stops. It stops right here. And we're making sure that those processes are going to be implemented, all 14 of them. I'm not here to disagree with the report I'm not here to say, no, we didn't do this, that, and the other thing. I'm here to say, yes, we accept the 14 recommendations. We're going to implement those recommendations, but we're in a housing crisis. I'm here to tell the people we're going to continue building homes to make them affordable for people out there, young families and newcomers to this great province.
Should it be our understanding that the most vulnerable people in this province, including refugees who you mentioned, will be able to afford houses that will pop up in what was once the Greenbelt?
Eventually they will. That's the Canadian story. That's the Ontarian story. I don't know if you don't have an opportunity to meet the people I do, and especially in my community in North Rexdale, you should come by and talk to these people. These people will tell you stories how they came with nothing, zero. And some are extremely successful business people. Those same people are employing, 10 people, 20 people, 50 and 100 people. But they started with absolutely nothing, and I've heard this story over and over and over again. That's what the Ontario dream is. And the majority of the people that are coming here, a lot, not all, have existing family members here. The word is out in the world. Come to Ontario, an economic powerhouse in North America. You're going to have great education. You're going to have great health care. We're going to have an opportunity to grow and own a home and start a business and start a family. That's the word around the world. We live in the most multicultural city and province anywhere in the world. People love Ontario because all of us, 99% of us, live, work side by side, and we get along. We're blessed to live in the greatest place anywhere in the entire world, and I'm convinced of that because I've had an opportunity to travel the world. I've had an opportunity to be down in the States for almost 20 years, and I see how they struggle, and we aren't going to struggle like they're struggling.
Hi, Premier. This is Jessica from the Trillium. You say these developers aren't your friends, but one of them did attend your daughter's wedding. And just days later, a lawyer representing him emailed Minister Clark's chief of staff requesting that 3 properties be removed from the Greenbelt, and they were removed. So you're telling us it's a coincidence that he knew to ask just the right person at just the right time to remove these properties from the Greenbelt?
Well, no one knew. No conversation ever was discussed. I can guarantee you that. I found out the day of when we went to cabinet, which happens frequently. It happens all the time. Here's the briefing. This is what we're bringing to cabinet, and I have to have confidence. I don't believe in micromanaging. I didn't believe micromanaging managers at my company, and I sure the heck don't believe in micromanaging every single ministry. I have confidence in the most qualified ministers I've ever seen in politics and qualified caucus members. I wake up every morning and thank God that I have qualified people on the team changing this province. Folks, when I took office, and I'm a business person, I'm a numbers person,